Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and to today's video where I'm going to be testing out watercolor pencils for the first time. I've never tried them out before and I was really excited to give these a go, as a lot of you have requested for me to do a video where I test out watercolor pencils. And this is actually going to be the start of a new series that I want to do on my channel, where I basically am going to be working in this new sketchbook that I got. I am going to basically every week be doing a new theme to the video, and we're going to be practicing watercolors and learning things together and experimenting with different supplies. So let's get into it and let's have a look at these watercolor pencils. I decided to go with this brand of pencils because Faber Castell have always been really good in the past. I've never had a problem with them, and after watching lots of videos, I've seen that quite a few people were using this brand. So I got the 60 set, and let's just get straight in and open this up. Oh, I love them. Let's look at all of these lovely colors. They do have a larger set, which is 120, and they also do have smaller sets as well. So there'll definitely be something to suit your needs if you do want to have a little look at these. And they do come in 2 layers. Oh, I love all the colors. I love getting a new set of pencils. It's the best thing ever when they're all in the right place and they're not messed up or sharpened, and it just smells really nice. I love the smell of new pencils. I didn't find that the pricing of this was too bad. I mean, it is more on the expensive side of watercolor pencils. They aren't cheap, but I didn't feel like the price was completely crazy. So I will put the exact price up now, and I did get them off Amazon. So the way these pencils are meant to work is basically they're like colored pencils in the way that you lay them down, and then you can apply water and it basically transforms them into watercolors. So you can go and shade all of your drawing first and then add water, and it turns it into a lovely watercolor masterpiece. So I want to get straight into testing these out because I'm super excited, and I did create a minute ago this color chart, and it did take me a little bit of time to do this. And basically I've just listed all of the colors, and we're going to swatch each of these to just get kind of an idea of the color range that we have. So let's start off by filling this in. So as you can see, the colour chart is split into 4 different columns. So I decided to work on it column at a time, first by going in with the pencils and actually just laying the colour down into each of the little swatch sections. And basically what I did was I created a gradient effect, so being darker on the left hand side and then fading out to a really light layer of colour over on the right hand side. And I really wanted to have a nice gradient effect so that I could see all of the values that could be achieved with each pencil. And then I just went and activated each of the pencils with water, and I didn't have too much on my brush. I'm just using quite a small paintbrush, and you can see that it creates a really nice gradient when I go and add the water. Then once I'd finished adding all of the water to all of the colours in the first column, I then moved on to basically doing the same thing by shading the pencil for all of the colours within the second column. And then I just went over it with water again, and I activated each of the paints. Then I just basically repeated that process for the remaining half of the colour chart. And what I found was that when I added water, the pencil, the graininess of the pencil really did melt away and give this really beautiful watercolour effect. It just looked like normal watercolours. I couldn't see much of the graininess from the pencils whatsoever. The only sort of areas where you could see some of the pencil strokes was if I applied a bit too much pressure on the pencil and it really indented into the paper. But really, there wasn't an obvious sign that it was done with pencils at all. And here you can see a close-up of the finished result of the colour chart. And doing this really did give me an idea of the range of colours that I could get with this set. And it's obviously nice to have a range of colours to look at when you're deciding what colours to use. You can just refer back to your colour chart and you can pick the appropriate colours, because they do look different when they're activated with water than they did when they were in pencil form some of the time. It seemed a lot more vibrant once I added all of the water to the pencil. Now what I wanted to do was sketch out something in my sketchbook, so I decided to do a really flowery sort of branch. And because it was the first page in the sketchbook, I really wanted it to be something that looks really pretty, and when you open the sketchbook, it adds a really nice, like, relaxing and nice tone, and I just wanted it to be really, really pretty and simple. So what I did was I did this flowery branch, and I wanted it to go over both pages, and only this page that I'm working on really had the watercolor paper, but the real first side, it still had paper over it, so I didn't add too much flower to that, but just a little bit, just to create sort of more motion and flow to the flowers as they span across both pages. I just thought it made it look really nice to include both sides of the paper. And I'm just using one of the watercolor pencils to do this. I thought I'd use this purple color, and you can see it very lightly. I didn't apply too much pressure because obviously I didn't want the sketch outline to really stay. I wanted it to melt away once I added water. And you can see that it's just a very basic sketch of where I wanted the basic flowers to be and the twigs and the branch. And then what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a little border. So I wanted to mask off the flowers, create a border, and then fill in the background. Now, before I actually went in and added the masking fluid, I thought it was important to lighten up the sketch as much as possible, because when I added water, I don't want there to be a real purple look to the flowers and branches. So I just went in with my eraser and lifted up the excess coloured pencil. And then I went in and I used some washi tape just to border off the edges. And I wanted to create the look of beautiful flowers that are spanning over this rectangular border that I'm creating. So obviously you can see that some of the flowers are going outside of this box. Now, because I wanted to do the background first, it would obviously be very hard to work in between all of the flowers. So I thought it'd just be easier to mask it off first. And I just bought this pen, which is the Molotow or something. I'll leave it in the description. It's like a masking fluid pen, so you can really get into all of the little details, which it can be hard to do with a paintbrush and the thicker masking fluid. So I just went in with this pen, and it was so easy to get in all of the little twigs and branches, and I basically just covered all of this with masking fluid. And it's basically like a latex. When it dries, it turns into this rubber so that you can paint a wash all over the background, and you don't have to worry about getting any paint on your main subject, which is the flowers in this case. So it's really, really great. Once the paint's dry, you can then peel off the masking fluid, and it will just be white paper, and you can just go and then work on the details like usual. And it's just so good because it doesn't stain the paper at all, and I was really happy with this. Now that I've added all of the masking fluid, I'm going to start to work on the painting now. But before we start, if you guys do want to see real-time painting tutorials where I go through all of my techniques for how I create realistic and loose watercolor paintings, then I have got over 300 real-time tutorials over on my Patreon for both watercolor, colored pencil and charcoal, and a few other mediums as well. There's tutorials for animal drawings and for portraits, so there is a lot of range over on my Patreon. For just a small amount per month, you'll get access to all of the tutorials I have ever uploaded, plus new tutorials every month, and they're all in real time with voiceover. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. Whilst I was waiting for the masking fluid to dry completely, I decided to pick out the colours that I wanted to use for the whole painting. So I used my colour chart to help me decide which colours I thought would be best for the background, the actual flowers and the branches. And then once I'd picked the colours, I got the colours that I selected for the background, and I just started blocking in where I wanted the different colours to go by lightly shading using the side of the pencil. And I found that it really did lay down very smoothly, very easily. I didn't need to apply a lot of pressure for the pigment to really come off onto the paper, and the pencils themselves didn't feel scratchy at all. They felt really nice and soft, and the laydown was very, very, very smooth. So you can see that I'm adding in blues and pinks, and I wanted this to be quite a blurred out background. I didn't want there to be any detail, just a few different colours merging into each other. Obviously I wanted the flowers and branch to be the focal point, so I just wanted a simplistic background just to add a bit more interest to the piece. Once I've finished adding all of the pencil, I need to now go and activate it with water. So I'm using my silver black velvet paintbrushes, and I'm using a slightly larger round paintbrush, and I'm just using that with a bit of water on the brush, simply just to go over the paint and really activate it. And you can see that the pigment really does bleed into each other nicely and gives a very nice wet on wet look when you start just activating it. Or you do have to work quite quickly, because I found that it dries very quickly around the edges, and if you don't want any harsh edges, then you do have to work quite quickly, but that might also be because of the paper as well. Obviously this is the first time that I'm using this sketchbook, so it's probably the paper as well. Then what I wanted to do once I finished blending that out is go in with a tissue, and I like to do this to lift off a bit of the paint just to add a bit of highlight, and I just wanted to give a smooth fluffy cloud effect. I then waited for that layer to completely dry, and I built up a second layer with the pencils once again, and I found that they worked really well on top of the first layer. It worked just the same. You do need to make sure that it is very dry and completely dry before you go in and add the pencils, but I just kept building up more layers to just deepen up the colours really and make them more intense. And then once again I did the same thing by activating all of that paint with the water and just blending it all out. And just like the colour chart, I didn't see any graininess really. The pencils just bled out so smoothly and they just turned into watercolours. There wasn't any graininess, which I think you can get with cheaper pencils. So because these were such high quality pencils, it meant that they blended out really smoothly. I then used a hairdryer to fully dry the second layer, and that's all I'm doing with the background, just very nice and simple. And I just completely let it dry, and then I removed the masking fluid, and as you can see I'm just using my finger to rub away all of the masking fluid, and it comes off really easily. It didn't damage the paper whatsoever. So like I said, this was the first time I was using this art supply, and I was so happy with how it performed. It was definitely easier and quicker than using the fluid in a bottle, and there was less wastage, and it didn't wreck any paintbrushes, which normal masking fluid does. It came off so easily and I didn't see any staining whatsoever. I then removed the tape because that's all done with the background now. I didn't need the tape on there, and obviously we've already done flowers under the tape, so we need to work on the flowers now, and the tape would just get in the way. So I just removed the tape, and you can see that it will create a really nice effect by having the flowers go over the background, and that's what I really wanted to create. I'm now starting to work on the flowers and the branches, and I'm laying down my first layer of watercolour pencil. And I'm starting off with the branches using a green tone. I only used 3 colours for the branches, and I basically just went throughout and added a green layer of pencil over all of the branches and twigs. I then deepened it up with some brown, and I did pre-select the colours that I was going to use looking at the colour chart. So I'm just adding brown to where I think the shadows would be on the bottom of the branch, and then I went in and I deepened it up even more with some black. And I wasn't applying much pressure at all because I really didn't want to have a pencil sort of look to the painting. I wanted it to look like a painting, just like if you were using watercolours. So I made sure to be really light because I wanted to build it up in layers rather than trying to do it all in one. I then started to work on the flowers, and I used red tones, deep purple tones like I used for the outline sketch, and I didn't add the watercolour to the whole of the flower because I knew that I wanted some areas of the flower to remain white, and if I added watercolour everywhere then it's just going to get rid of all of the highlights. So I applied some pigment and some colour pencil, but I was aware that I wanted to preserve some of the highlights, and that when I added the water I would just use some of the pigment from the darker areas and pull it over to the highlights, if that makes sense. And yeah, you can see I haven't added it everywhere. There's definitely a lot of white areas to show. I also thought I'd add those little cute petals to create that like windswept look and flow to the painting. And then I activated all of this pencil with water, and I'm using a smaller paintbrush because it's more of a detailed area. And once again, I was super happy with how these pencils performed. There was no graininess, even with the darker colours like the black. And you can just see by looking at it, it creates a really nice, beautiful watercolour effect. I'm now adding water to the flowers, and you can see that I'm first going in and I'm blending out the darkest areas that I added paint to, and then I pull some of that colour over with more water to the lighter areas. And it does create the loose watercolour effect that I usually go for. So one thing that I was worried about is that using pencils would mean that everything would become too structured and rigid, and I wouldn't be able to do those loose watercolour techniques. But as you can see, I get some really expressive loose effects in with this painting, and I was really happy about that. So I think if you don't just cover everywhere with pencil and you just focus on the mid-tones and darkest areas, and then leave room to play and add like effects and pull the paint around, then you can get some really beautiful results. Another cool thing that I did was I actually put my paintbrush directly onto the tip of the pencil to paint in some darker colours. So you don't always have to apply the pencil directly to the paper. You could actually get your paintbrush and tap it on the tip of the pencil to actually create splatters like this, and to, you know, deepen up some shadows. I then went in once everything had dried completely, and I went in and I deepened up the branch because I felt like they were a bit too light and I really wanted them to pop, so I felt like I wanted to build up some more contrast in the piece. So I mainly just added the black to the shadowed parts of the branches, and then I once again went and blended it out with a bit of water, and I used a bit less water on this layer because I really wanted it to remain as dark as possible, and if I used too much water it would have diluted the paint. Now I'm going to go in with some white gouache, and I just wanted to use that to add a few highlights and a few splatters. I wanted to add a fluffy look to the background, to some of the clouds. So I added quite an opaque consistency of the paint and then just bled it out with a bit more water to create a really fluffy, snowy effect to the background. And I wanted to create a few more highlights just again to make it pop a bit more. And I just go throughout some of the branches. I add a bit of highlight to the top of some of the branches, and like I said, I added a few splatters. And we're nearly done with this piece. I just wanted to then go and date it because I'm working in a sketchbook. I wanted to make sure that I'm dating all of the paintings so that when I look back on this, I can see when each of these was created and see my journey. Overall, I really enjoyed using these watercolour pencils. They were so much fun to have a play around with, and I'll definitely be doing a lot more paintings with them in the future. But anyway guys, that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new around here, and even tick that bell icon so you do get notified on my future videos. But that is it from me, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye everybody.